It started over dinner, the kind of family meal that looks picture perfect if you don't know the people sitting around the table. My sister, Samantha, had just finished talking about her foundation's latest gala. Her husband, Richard, was bragging about defense contracts like they were family trophies. My parents smiled, proud of their successful daughter and her wealthy husband. Then it was my turn. "So, Rachel," Samantha said, with that syrupy smile that always meant trouble. "Still doing paperwork for the Navy?" The table went quiet for a moment, then my father chuckled. My mother followed. Even Richard grinned. I set my fork down and looked at her. "Something like that," she smirked. "That's adorable. I could never work under someone. I like being my own boss." She said it like my entire career, 20 years of command, deployments, and logistics operations was just clerical work. But I'd learned long ago that silence hurts more than reaction, so I smiled. Dinner continued like nothing happened. The same pretentious talk about who got invited to what, the same fake laughter that always filled this house. I chewed quietly, counting every second until I could leave. Then, as my father raised his glass to make a toast, I noticed the framed photo behind him, Samantha and Richard, standing next to a banner that read, "Hail Defense Logistics." Below it, the words Department of Defense Contractor gleamed in gold. It wasn't unusual. Richard's company handled supply chain work for several military bases. But what caught my eye was the small logo in the corner. Carter Foundation, Partner in Service. My family had always been good at turning favors into philanthropy. "Rachel," my father said suddenly, "you've been quiet. How's the Navy treating you?" I looked back at him, steady. "Same as always. We serve, we protect, we follow the rules." He nodded like he didn't hear a word I said. Samantha giggled, whispering something to Richard that made him smirk. I smiled again, but this time it wasn't polite, it was precision. The kind of smile you give before you pull the pin. Dinner wrapped up with dessert and family photos. Samantha insisted on taking a sister picture. She leaned close, reeking of champagne and superiority. "You should really come to the gala this year," she said softly. "It's classy. You'll love it." I didn't answer. I just looked at her reflection in the glass cabinet, her dress glittering, her posture perfect, her confidence unearned. When I got in my car later, the sound of the Navy clock ticking on my dashboard was louder than the engine. I sat there for a minute, letting the night sink in. The Carter house had always felt like a place where love came with conditions and respect was currency. And tonight, they'd spent all of theirs. As I started the car, I replayed Samantha's words. "Still doing paperwork for the Navy." She had no idea. She didn't know that paperwork meant signing off on logistics that fed fleets and armed bases. She didn't know that one of my signatures could pause her husband's million-dollar contracts if something didn't look right. I wasn't angry, anger's too loud. I was something colder, focused. The next morning, while sipping black coffee at my kitchen table in San Diego, I pulled up the internal Navy logistics database. My clearance level let me access nearly everything in my division. I wasn't looking for trouble, just curiosity professional, detached curiosity. I typed "Hail Defense Logistics" into the system. The company name popped up instantly, tied to Project Trident Logistics, a major Navy supply operation worth over $1 billion. The project handled procurement chains for fuel, repair parts, and transport. And one line caught my eye. Carter Foundation, charitable contributor, listed partner. No, that wasn't possible. Federal ethics policy strictly prohibited connections between contractors and personal family foundations. I leaned back, staring at the screen. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Maybe it was coincidence. Maybe Richard had no idea his company's donation created a legal mess. But if there's one thing 20 years in uniform teaches you, it's this: there are no coincidences in money. Still, I didn't make a move yet, not without facts. I closed my laptop and looked around my quiet kitchen. Sunlight hit the photo on the fridge me with my unit aboard the USS Meridian. Every person in that picture understood accountability. Every decision had weight. Samantha wouldn't understand that. She thought control came from status and money. She never learned that real control is invisible. It's the power of knowing the rules better than the people who try to bend them. I poured another cup of coffee and smiled. The taste was bitter, but satisfying. That night, I got an email from my mother. Subject line: dinner was wonderful. The message was short, polished, and cold, like everything else in that family. Your sister is planning a big event next month. She'd love you to attend. Please, Rachel, just wear something simple. No uniform. We don't need attention. I stared at those words for a long time. No uniform. That was when I realized this wasn't just about ego, it was about fear. Something about my presence, my uniform, made them nervous. And people only get nervous when they're hiding something. I closed the laptop and leaned back, the city lights of San Diego reflecting off the window. They thought I was the quiet one. The one who followed orders. The one who stayed small. Maybe that's what they needed to believe. Because it's easier to laugh at someone than to admit they could destroy everything you built quietly, legally, and without raising their voice. And I was very, very good at being quiet. If you've ever had someone underestimate you like that, let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if you enjoy real-life cheating stories, revenge stories, and tales of family betrayal that end with quiet power, subscribe to the channel. There's more truth than noise in what comes next. The phone rang just after sunrise. I almost didn't answer. It was Sunday, and no one calls me that early unless it's an emergency. But when I saw the name Mom, I sighed and picked it up. Rachel, honey, she started, her voice overly sweet. Did I wake you? No, ma'am. I was up. I just wanted to check in after dinner. You seemed quiet. There it was again, quiet. To her, that word always meant inconvenient. I was fine, I said, stirring my coffee. Dinner was familiar. She hesitated. Samantha told me she invited you to the gala next month. It would mean a lot if you came. Just, I don't wear the uniform this time. You know how people talk. I froze for half a second. People? Well, you know, it's not really that kind of event. It's a family evening. Samantha wants to keep it classy, that's all. Classy. That was her polite way of saying don't overshadow your sister. I'll think about it, I said flatly. Before she could answer, I heard another voice in the background. Male, low, confident, Richard Hale. My brother-in-law. He said something muffled, then my mother replied, Yes, she's on the line right now. My grip tightened on the phone. Mom, I said, calm but sharp, why is Richard at your house on a Sunday morning? Oh, he just stopped by to help your father with some paperwork for the foundation, she said quickly. Anyway, I should let you go. Love you, dear. The line went dead. I stared at my reflection in the microwave door. My mother never called just to say hello, and she never lied that fast unless someone had coached her. The last sip of coffee went cold in my mouth. I grabbed my bag and headed to the base. Sunday or not, I needed to move. At Naval Base San Diego, the air always carried that mix of salt, metal, and diesel that only sailors appreciate. It smelled like work getting done. I walked past the flight deck and into the administrative wing, nodding at a few officers who probably thought I lived there, which wasn't entirely wrong. Inside my office, I opened my secure laptop and logged into the Department of Defense Ethics database. It wasn't something I did often, but I knew the system like the back of my hand. Every high-level contractor and corporate donation was logged there for compliance purposes. I typed Carter Foundation. 2 results appeared, both recent. Hale Defense Logistics. Donation. $2, 4 million. Joint Humanitarian Project with Navy Logistics Division, Region Pacific. That second line made my jaw tighten. Region Pacific was my jurisdiction. It meant my sister's foundation wasn't just hosting fancy dinners, it was financially connected to the same military logistics network I oversaw. I leaned back, letting that sink in. The Navy doesn't tolerate even the hint of conflict of interest, especially not with federal contracts. And if my family was tangled up in one, it could stain more than their reputation, it could drag mine down too. I reached for my phone, then stopped. No. Calling Samantha would tip her off, and calling my mother would only end with, Rachel, please don't make trouble. Instead, I opened a new document and started writing a preliminary ethics concern report. It wasn't an accusation, just a flag. A quiet notification to the Naval Audit Division that a personal conflict might exist involving a contractor and a family foundation. Every word had to be precise. I didn't include names beyond what was already public, just facts. No emotion, no commentary. When I finished, I reviewed it once, then hovered my cursor over send. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just exhaled slowly and clicked. Somewhere in Washington, a server recorded the timestamp of that report, 9:42 a.m. Pacific Time. From that moment, a small process had begun, one that could unravel everything my sister thought she controlled. I closed the laptop and rubbed my temple. The silence in my office felt heavier than usual. Admiral? I looked up. Lieutenant Miles Grant stood in the doorway holding a file. He was young, sharp, the kind of officer who still believed the system worked perfectly. "Morning, sir." "Sorry, ma'am," he corrected quickly. "Didn't mean to interrupt." "It's fine, Miles. What do you need?" "Just the Trident update. Logistics is on schedule, but there's chatter about new vendor audits." "Should we prepare documentation?" "Always," I said, signing the form he handed me. "And, Lieutenant, never assume the system's perfect. Just make sure you are." He nodded, a little confused, and left. When the door closed, I looked down at the folder in my hands. Project Trident Logistics. Same project tied to Hail Defense. Same web my family was hiding behind. I placed it on the edge of the desk and stared at the Navy seal on the cover. There are moments in a career when you stop being a participant and become the observer, when you realize you're standing in the middle of something that will define you. This was one of those moments. The phone buzzed again. Samantha. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hey, little sister," she said, voice sugary as ever. "Mom told me you might come to the gala. I hope you do. Everyone will be there. It'll be good PR for the family." "PR?" I asked. "Well, yes. You know, image. The press loves a military touch. Maybe you could come in something navy blue, just not the actual uniform." There it was again. That word. Uniform. "I'll be there," I said, cutting her off. "And I'll wear exactly what I'm supposed to." She laughed. "That's the Rachel I know. Always following rules." The line clicked dead before I could reply. I sat there for a long minute, the bass noise fading behind me, the hum of ventilation, the distant echo of engines, the heartbeat of a place built on precision. Outside, the ocean glimmered against the horizon, calm but endless. And somewhere in that calm, I felt it a shift. Not rage, not fear, just clarity, the kind of focus that comes when you finally see the battlefield for what it is. They wanted me to stay quiet. They wanted me invisible. But they had just handed me the reason not to be. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I stayed on base. The kind of late shift no one assigns but everyone recognizes, the one where something's quietly on fire. The halls were half lit, the hum of the ventilation filling the silence. I poured myself a cup of burnt coffee and opened the Navy procurement portal again. The Trident Logistics database wasn't supposed to surprise me. I'd been overseeing the Pacific Division for years. But seeing my brother-in-law's company listed under preferred vendor was like finding a family heirloom buried in evidence. I clicked through the files. Hail Defense Logistics had been awarded multiple subcontracts over the last 3 years. Fuel transport, hardware storage, even cybersecurity infrastructure. Everything looked legitimate at first glance. Every signature, every timestamp matched protocol. But then, I saw one memo attached to the contract. Approved by Commander Rachel Carter, Naval Logistics Pacific Division. I froze. That wasn't possible. I scrolled down. The digital signature was mine. The date? 6 months ago. I checked my duty log from that week. I'd been in Okinawa, overseeing shipyard compliance, nowhere near the mainland office. Someone had used my authorization ID remotely. That was illegal at every level. I leaned back in my chair. The air felt thinner. Someone inside the system had forged my clearance to approve a vendor I was related to. If that ever surfaced, I wouldn't just lose my command. I'd be the face of the scandal. I picked up my phone, dialed Naval IT Security, and spoke with Chief Warrant Officer Lewis, one of the few tech officers who didn't bore me with jargon. "Lewis, it's Carter," I said. "I need a trace on an authorization key used 6 months ago. IDRC 4407. He paused. That's yours, ma'am. I know. That's why I need the trace. He exhaled through the line. You expecting trouble? I'm expecting accuracy. Within an hour, Lewis called back. The access came through a remote Navy node in DC government, verified IP, so no firewall alarms. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. Can you tell who? No names. Just a clearance level. What level? Civilian contractor. High tier. That was all I needed to hear. I closed my laptop and stared out the window. The base lights shimmered over the dark ocean, every bulb a reminder of control and order. My family operated in the opposite way behind curtains, through favors, with handshakes that didn't need paperwork. I'd spent 2 decades keeping things running on time and under budget. Now I was realizing some of those wheels were greased with family fingerprints. I wasn't going to confront anyone. Not yet. I needed to understand how deep this went. The next morning, I walked into the Naval Audit Division without an appointment. The clerk recognized me immediately and stood straighter. Vice Admiral Carter. How can I help you, ma'am? I'm not here officially, I said, handing over a sealed envelope. This is a preliminary ethics notice internal review only. I want confirmation of receipt, but no action without clearance from Admiral Peterson's office. The clerk nodded, his hand slightly trembling as he stamped the form. Understood, ma'am. That paper would trigger a background sweep of every vendor linked to the project. Not an investigation, just a quiet look. Enough to alert Washington that someone was paying attention. When I stepped outside, the sun was already burning across the docks. Sailors marched in formation nearby, their cadence echoing through the air. The sound steadied me. That rhythm, the one thing in this world you can still trust. By noon, I was back in my office. Miles, my young lieutenant, knocked once and stepped in holding a file. Ma'am, new vendor reports from the East Coast just came in. Hale Defense's name is on 3 of them. I raised an eyebrow. 3? Yes, ma'am. They're expanding contracts faster than anyone else this quarter. Bring them here, I said. He placed the folders on my desk and lingered for a second. Ma'am, off the record, people say your sister's connected to that company. Is that true? I looked up. His tone wasn't gossip, it was curiosity, maybe even concern. People say a lot of things, Lieutenant, I said. The truth usually comes out in the audit. He nodded and left, closing the door softly behind him. The room felt smaller after that. I opened the file and scanned the documents again, this time paying attention to the numbers in the fine print. Each contract included charitable donations routed through Carter Foundation as part of their community engagement. Smart. Legal on paper. Dirty in practice. I made a note. Cross-check donation channels divided by verify shell contributions. When I looked up, the clock on the wall read 18:03. Outside, the sun was slipping behind the hangars, washing the sky in dark gold. I hadn't eaten since morning, but I didn't feel hungry. I powered down the computer and grabbed my coat. Before leaving, I stopped at the door and glanced back at the glowing screen of my secure phone, 2 missed calls from Mom and 1 from Samantha. They never called that much unless something was wrong, or unless someone had told them that their names had just been quietly filed in a federal system they didn't know existed. I turned off the lights and walked down the hall. My footsteps echoed on the tile floor, measured, steady, deliberate. That's the thing about silence. People mistake it for peace, but in the right hands, it's just another weapon. As I reached the exit, I passed the giant Navy emblem carved into the marble wall. I paused, my reflection overlapping the anchor. If Hale Defense thought they could hide under family connections, they were about to learn something my sister never did. Rank doesn't just give you power, it gives you the patience to wait for the exact moment to use it. The night air outside was sharp and clean. The base lights flickered across the water like quiet signals. I walked toward my car, the phone buzzing again in my pocket. I didn't answer. Not yet. The gym was empty that morning, just the hum of the ventilation and the rhythmic slap of my shoes against the floor. I wasn't there to train. I was there to think. Anger never did me much good. It burns fast, dies faster. But discipline, that's different. Discipline waits. As I started another set, A song from the overhead speakers dragged me backward back to Annapolis, the night before graduation. Samantha had come to visit, wearing a cocktail dress too expensive for a Navy base. She'd looked around the dorms and laughed. "You're really doing this, huh?" she'd said, spinning a coin on my desk. "Living on rations and rules?" I'd smiled then, too. "Someone has to." "You're wasting your time, Rachel. No one remembers the quiet ones." That line stuck. It became the background noise of my 20s, my 30s. Every deployment, every sleepless night, every mission report, it was always there, that voice. And every time someone underestimated me, I learned how to use silence as a blade. The memory faded as the gym door creaked open. Lieutenant Miles walked in, holding a file. His uniform was crisp, his face too eager for the hour. "Ma'am," he said, trying to catch his breath, "we got an internal notice from D.C." I grabbed a towel and motioned for him to follow. "Walk with me." We cut across the corridor toward my office. The early sun hit the hallway windows, bright and clinical. "What kind of notice?" I asked. "Federal audit request. Preliminary, for Project Trident. It's routine, but—" he hesitated. "They flagged a potential ethics overlap. Contractor donations tied to private family foundations. The example listed is Carter Foundation." I stopped mid-step. "That's not coincidence." "No, ma'am." He handed me the folder. The form was standard government gray, with language that danced around the real issue: suspicion of conflict between Hale Defense Logistics and Carter Foundation. It didn't say investigation, but it didn't have to. "Who initiated it?" I asked. He swallowed. "It came from Naval Audit Division, but it's signed off by Admiral Peterson." So the report I'd filed had already moved. Faster than expected. I dismissed Miles with a nod and shut the office door behind me. For a long moment, I didn't move. The report sat on my desk, neat and harmless looking, like a loaded weapon still in its holster. Outside, the base was waking up, jets rumbling, sailors calling cadence. I picked up the photo frame on my desk, the one from our first deployment, 14 of us in the picture. 3 didn't make it home. You don't go through something like that and then play games with ethics. I set the frame down and opened my laptop. My sister's name wasn't on any official record, of course. She was too careful for that. But Richard's name was on every page, every contract, every check. They thought the uniform was a prop, something to brag about at parties. They didn't understand that the uniform comes with rules, and rules always lead to accountability. Around noon, my secure line buzzed. "Carter," I answered. "Admiral Peterson here." "Sir." "I read your preliminary report," he said. "You've stirred something. Good instincts, but you know what comes next." "Yes, sir." "I'm approving an internal ethics review. Quiet, limited personnel. You'll have clearance to monitor but not interfere. And Rachel," he paused, "I know what it's like when family gets caught in the line of duty." "You sure you're ready for that?" "I was ready the moment they used my name," I said. He exhaled. "Then move carefully. Integrity has teeth, and it bites everyone." The call ended. I sat there, listening to the dial tone fade into silence. That evening, I drove back to my apartment overlooking the bay. San Diego looked calm from up-high families walking dogs, joggers in uniform, kids with ice cream cones. None of them had any idea how much of their comfort depended on the invisible chain of people like me keeping the gears clean. I poured a glass of water and sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker on one by one. It reminded me of a night years ago when I was stationed in Bahrain. The base had lost power, and we'd gone hours without communication. I remembered sitting under the open sky, thinking about home. Back then, I still cared what Samantha thought. Now, I just wondered how long she'd been laughing behind my back. My phone buzzed a message from her. Just a picture this time. Her and Richard at some fancy dinner, champagne in hand, captioned, "Another night of service and success." Underneath it, the Carter Foundation logo. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Service and success. For her, that meant donations and press coverage. For me, it meant soldiers with names on plaques. The two worlds could not have been more different, yet they were about to collide in ways she couldn't imagine. I opened my work laptop again. The Navy's secure portal blinked to life, waiting for credentials. I typed my access code and pulled up Trident Logistics once more. A new attachment appeared: overnight audit preparation protocol, stage 1. Admiral Peterson wasn't wasting time. I downloaded the form and filled in the required fields, my hands steady. Each keystroke felt deliberate, mechanical, like the rhythm of marching boots. When it was done, I hit submit. For a few seconds, the screen stayed blank, then confirmed receipt. Somewhere, an auditor in DC would wake up tomorrow to a file with my signature. And they'd start following the trail Samantha and Richard had left: clean, polished, but traceable. Always traceable. Outside, a Navy destroyer horn sounded across the harbor deep, commanding, final. I turned off the lights and stood by the window. The ocean looked black and endless, dotted with faint glows from anchored ships, the kind of view that makes you feel both small and certain. I wasn't sure when exactly my family became part of the system I was sworn to protect, but I knew this. Once you start pulling on a thread, you don't stop because it's uncomfortable. You stop when it's clean. And if that meant pulling my own blood into the light, then so be it. The elevator doors opened to the quiet hum of the command floor. Admiral Peterson's office was on the far end, no guards, no secretary that morning, just the faint sound of typing and the smell of coffee that had been burning for hours. I didn't knock. He'd told me once, "If you have to knock, you're already late." He looked up as I entered. "Carter," he said, removing his glasses. "Close the door." I did. The latch clicked, sealing off the noise of the base. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "You know, when I signed your promotion, I told the board you were the kind of officer who'd rather break protocol than let the system rot. Looks like I was right." "I didn't break anything, sir. I filed the report by the book." He leaned back, studying me like he was trying to decide if I was brave or just stubborn. "You filed a report on a federal contractor tied to your own family's foundation. That's not by the book. That's volunteering to be collateral damage." I stayed quiet. He sighed and turned a monitor toward me. The screen showed a list of recent audit requests, dozens of names, budgets, project codes. He tapped one. "Project Trident Logistics. This," he said, "is officially under review. And not because you asked for it. Someone upstairs noticed the donation trail. You might have lit the match, but the fire's spreading." "How bad?" I asked. "Bad enough that defense oversight is watching. If they find proof of fraud or influence, it won't just be your sister or her husband on the hook. It'll be every officer who signed anything with Hale Defense on it." "Which includes my forged signature," I said. He nodded slowly. "Which is why you're not touching this case again. You'll observe only. No interference, no contact with the family. With respect, sir, if my name's being used—" He cut me off. "I know, and I'll make sure security continues tracing the source. But, Rachel, you need to understand something. These people don't panic when a journalist calls. They panic when a Carter does." His tone softened. "You're in dangerous water. And not because of what you did, but because you did it right." He let the words hang. For a moment, I wasn't in that office. I was 10 years old again, standing in my father's study while he told Samantha she'd make the family proud and told me I should find a stable government job. Funny how those words turned out. "Sir," I said finally, "I won't let this get buried." Peterson's gaze didn't waver. "Then make sure you don't get buried with it." He reached into his desk drawer, pulled out a small folder, and slid it across to me. "Here's what you're cleared to see. The rest let the auditors handle. I'm giving you room to breathe, not room to fight." I opened the folder. Inside were copies of internal communications emails between Hale Defense executives and Carter Foundation administrators. The language was polished, professional, and painfully familiar. "Appreciate the Navy's continued partnership. Delighted to align our philanthropic goals with defense readiness initiatives." That last line nearly made me laugh. They'd found a way to disguise corruption as charity. I closed the folder. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" Peterson nodded. "This isn't charity. It's laundering integrity through family names. And if I don't fight it, it becomes the standard." "Okay." He studied me for a long moment. "You sound like someone who's already made up her mind." "I have." He smiled faintly. "Then God help the people who think they're smarter than you." I stood to leave. He said one more thing as I reached the door. "Rachel, just remember, honor's a blade. Sharpen it too much, and it cuts both ways." I paused, then nodded once. Understood. Outside, the base was buzzing. Helicopters thudded overhead. Mechanics shouted across the docks, the scent of salt water mixed with jet fuel. Everything about this place felt honest, hard, loud, real. The opposite of the world I'd grown up in. I walked to the edge of the pier, where the USS Meridian was docked. The destroyer gleamed under the sunlight, massive and immovable. Its reflection rippled across the water, and for the first time that week, I felt steady again. A sailor nearby saluted. "Morning, Admiral." "Oh, morning," I said, returning the gesture. I stayed there longer than I needed to, letting the wind hit my face. Every decision I'd ever made came back to this. Serve with integrity, no matter who's watching. The thing about family is, they always expect you to protect them. They never consider that sometimes. Protecting them means letting the truth do the damage. By the time I got back to my office, my inbox had a new message. Subject: Ethics Review. Authorization confirmed. From Department of Defense Audit Command. Body: effective immediately, a federal ethics audit has been approved for the Trident Logistics project. That was it. One line. No emotion, no commentary, just procedure. I closed the email and stared at the screen. The process had officially begun. Later that night, I drove home through the Pacific fog. The streets were empty, quiet, wrapped in that eerie calm only military towns have after dark. When I parked, the phone buzzed with a new text: "Samantha, can you please call Mom? She's anxious. The Foundation got some questions from Washington. Did you say something?" I put the phone face down on the counter and poured myself a glass of water. The answer was simple. Yes, I had said something. I'd said it through the system, through rules that people like her thought were flexible. Outside, the harbor lights blinked in slow rhythm. The same way, truth moves quietly, persistently, until it can't be ignored. I didn't call her back. I didn't need to. She'd find out soon enough how loud silence could get when it came from someone in uniform. The envelope showed up on my desk 3 days later. Heavy paper, gold edges, and a wax seal with the Carter Foundation logo pressed into it. I didn't have to open it to know what it was. My sister never missed a chance to make her handwriting look like a weapon. Still, I slid it open with a letter opener, careful, deliberate. The Carter Foundation Annual Gala, celebrating family legacy and service to the nation. I let out a quiet laugh. Family legacy. That was rich. At the bottom, in her neat cursive, Samantha had written a note. "Rachel, we'd love for you to attend. Please dress appropriately, no uniform this time. Let's make this event about family, not rank." I stared at that last line until the letters blurred. It wasn't about rank. It was about control. Every word she used was meant to put me back in a box I'd spent 20 years climbing out of. I folded the invitation neatly and slipped it into my drawer. Then I unlocked the cabinet beside me and pulled out a plain brown envelope stamped "Confidential for internal delivery only." Inside were copies of the preliminary audit forms, dates, transaction chains, donation amounts, all clean, all legal-looking, but threaded together with one repeating pattern. Hail Defense Logistics Carter Foundation, Federal Procurement Credits. A perfect little circle of mutual benefit. I added one more document to the stack. A formal audit notice, signed by Admiral Peterson, authorizing an immediate federal ethics review. I sealed the envelope again and placed it in my briefcase. When I walked out of the office that day, the sky over San Diego was clear and almost too bright. The kind of day that feels like it's pretending to be peaceful. Miles caught up with me in the parking lot, out of breath. "Ma'am, one question: should we notify the vendors yet about the compliance checks?" "Not yet," I said. "People reveal the most when they think they're safe." He nodded, half understanding, and watched as I got into my car. The drive home was long and quiet. I didn't play music. I just thought about how every family has its own kind of hierarchy. The military was predictable rank, years of service, chain of command. But family? Family ran on guilt and selective memory. By the time I reached my apartment, My phone had 10 missed calls from my mother. I didn't pick up. Instead, I set the invitation on the counter, next to a bottle of bourbon I'd bought years ago and never opened. I poured one small glass and looked out the window at the harbor lights. Somewhere out there, ships were moving under my orders. Thousands of sailors following commands I'd written. Yet in my own bloodline, I was still treated like a child who never quite fit the mold. I took a sip, felt the burn, and smiled. The taste was sharp, honest. The next morning, I walked into the base early, before most of the staff arrived. The corridors were dim, the fluorescent lights humming like insects. I liked it that way, quiet, empty, functional. In my office, the phone blinked red one voicemail. I pressed play. "Rachel, it's Mom," the message began. Her tone was clipped, rehearsed. "Please don't make a scene at the gala. Samantha's worked hard on this event, and we don't need any unnecessary attention. You've always been intense about your work. Just remember, it's family first." Family first. I deleted the message without saving it. An hour later, I got an email from the Department of Defense Office of Ethics, confirming that an investigator had been assigned to oversee the Hale defense audit. It wasn't a full-scale investigation yet, but the wheels were turning. And once the machine starts, it doesn't stop for feelings or holidays. By mid-afternoon, Admiral Peterson stopped by my office unannounced. He leaned on the doorframe, hands in his pockets. "You got your invitation too?" "Yes, sir." He grinned faintly. "You planning on going?" "I'm considering it." "Good. Just remember, you're walking into a den of people who think charm is a legal defense." I almost smiled. "Understood." Before he left, he added, "If you do show up, wear the uniform, the real one, not the one they think you should." After he was gone, I sat there for a while, replaying his words. I didn't need advice on how to face my family, but something about his tone stuck. It wasn't just approval, it was trust. The kind that's earned, not inherited. That night, I opened my closet and pulled out the white dress uniform. It hadn't been worn since the last naval ceremony in D.C., pressed, perfect, waiting. I ran a hand over the silver insignia on the shoulder. 3 stars. The symbol of everything they mocked and everything I'd built. I hung it on the door. The light from the window hit the metals, casting a soft reflection across the room. Then I reached for the brown envelope, the audit notice, and slid it carefully into my black leather portfolio. It wasn't vindictive. It wasn't revenge. It was procedure. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see anger anymore. I saw focus, years of discipline sharpened into one clean line of intent. Outside, the city was preparing for another sleepless night. Inside, I was already preparing for the gala. They wanted me to come as family. They were going to meet the officer instead. And for the first time in a long time, that felt exactly right. The night of the gala arrived like a polished lie, too perfect, too rehearsed. The St. Regis Ballroom glowed under chandeliers big enough to light a runway. Guests drifted in wearing smiles like armor, holding drinks they didn't really want, saying words they didn't really mean. I stepped out of the car and adjusted the brim of my cap. The white service dress uniform fit like truth, unforgiving, precise, unmistakable. Evans was beside me, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. "Ready, Admiral?" "As I'll ever be." The doorman blinked when he saw us. I could tell from the way his hand hesitated on the door handle he wasn't sure if he should salute or smile. I gave him the kind of nod that said both would be unnecessary. Inside, the sound hit first. Laughter, silverware, and the clinking rhythm of money pretending to be generosity. Tables gleamed under gold linens. The Carter Foundation logo sparkled above the stage in raised glass. My sister, Samantha, stood near the center, greeting donors like a politician, kiss on the cheek, practiced warmth, eyes always scanning for the next opportunity. She didn't see me right away. No one did. Conversations kept flowing. Wine kept pouring. But the moment I took 3 steps past the champagne tower, silence began to ripple outward like the sound of something sacred breaking. Heads turned. Someone whispered, "Is that?" It spread faster than gossip at a fundraiser. The laughter dimmed, the music faltered, and Samantha finally turned. Her smile froze mid-sentence. Her voice cracked just enough to betray her. "Rachel?" I smiled politely. "Vice Admiral Carter," I corrected, my tone calm enough to make the words sting twice. The air changed. People adjusted their ties, shifted their weight, suddenly aware that there was authority in the room that couldn't be bought. Our mother was the next to recover. She moved quickly, clutching her champagne flute like a microphone. "Well, isn't this a surprise? Rachel, dear, I thought we agreed you wouldn't—" "Wear the uniform?" I said. "You did mention that." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The quiet was louder than anything I could have said. From the corner of my eye, I spotted a man in a navy suit with a silver tie. Richard Hale, CEO of Hale Defense Logistics. The same man whose company had just triggered a federal ethics audit. He was standing beside my father, whispering something with a strained smile. I walked toward them slowly. Each step echoed across the marble like punctuation marks in a statement no one wanted to read aloud. My father's face hardened as I approached. "Rachel, this is not the time." "It's always the time for clarity," I said. Hale turned, feigning surprise. "Admiral, an honor. I wasn't aware the Navy was represented here tonight." "We're always represented," I replied evenly. "Some just don't recognize it until it's too late." Evans stepped forward, setting a sleek black folder on the table. The Navy insignia gleamed under the lights. The chatter around us died entirely. "What's this?" Samantha asked, her voice trembling just enough to betray control slipping through her fingers. "Documentation," I said, "from the Office of Naval Oversight. An official audit of Hale Defense Logistics, initiated by the Department of Defense, concerning recent financial activity involving the Carter Foundation." You could feel the shock crawl through the room like static. Hale's hand twitched toward his glass. "There must be some misunderstanding." "There isn't," I said. "The donation you labeled as philanthropy is now under federal review. Section 42 of the Defense Ethics Act doesn't allow private contributions to entities directly connected to active procurement officers. Which means this," I gestured to the ballroom, "isn't just a gala, it's evidence." My father stood rigid, jaw clenched. "Rachel, you're humiliating us." "No, Dad," I said softly. "You did that when you decided my integrity was negotiable." For a moment, no one moved. Cameras hovered midair, waiters froze mid-step. The entire ballroom had turned into a still photograph, everyone afraid to breathe. Hale's voice dropped, defensive. "Admiral, you're overstepping." "Actually," Evans said crisply, "she's fulfilling her duty. Officially." I caught the flicker of fear behind Hale's eyes, the one thing powerful men never expect to feel in public. Across the room, my mother was trying to smile through her panic. She reached for my hand, whispering, "Please, Rachel, not here. Not like this." "Ed?" I looked at her, then at the rows of guests watching, the chandeliers reflecting in their glasses like searchlights. "This is exactly where truth belongs," I said. "In the same room where reputation tried to bury it." Evans lifted the folder slightly. "We'll need signatures confirming receipt of audit notice." Hale hesitated, then picked up the pen. His hand shook as he signed, the ink scratching across paper that suddenly weighed more than gold. When it was done, Evans closed the folder and stepped back. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the only thing anyone heard for several seconds. Then I looked at Samantha. "You once told me no one remembers the quiet ones." She didn't answer. She couldn't. I leaned in just enough for her to hear. "Turns out, they remember the ones who show up when it counts." The orchestra hadn't played a note since I walked in. No one dared start it again. I turned to Evans. "Secure the documents." "Ed, sir." "Yes, Admiral." As he left with the folder, I straightened my cap, turned back to the guests, and smiled. "Enjoy the evening, everyone. It's a beautiful night for accountability." The room didn't erupt. It didn't gasp. It just stayed still because silence has its own kind of applause. I walked out through the same doors I came in, the sound of my heels on marble echoing like finality. The cool night air hit my face, and I exhaled for the first time all evening. Across the street, the city lights shimmered on wet pavement, reflecting gold and white like mirrored command stripes. Evans waited by the car, holding the folder like a relic. He opened the door, But before I stepped in, he said quietly, "They'll never forget that entrance." I smiled faintly. They weren't supposed to. Then I got in, and the car pulled away, no music, no small talk. Just the soft hum of an engine cutting through the dark, steady and calm, the way justice sounds when it's already in motion. The morning after the gala broke with the kind of sunlight that pretends nothing happened. My phone was already vibrating before I opened my eyes. Emails, voicemails, news alerts, all carrying the same word in bold, audit. By 0600, the federal ethics team had already sealed Hale Defense's accounts. The Carter Foundation's donations were frozen pending review. And the footage from last night's ballroom had made its way online. Someone had recorded the moment I said, "evidence." I didn't need to watch it to know how it looked. A vice admiral, in full uniform, standing in the middle of a luxury gala, while billionaires froze like statues. Truth had gone viral in less than 8 hours. Evans showed up at my door holding 2 coffees and a look that said, "You started something you can't undo." "Morning, Admiral," he said. "Morning," I replied, still scanning my inbox. He placed the coffee on my desk. "Command wants a statement." Statement or apology? They didn't specify. "Then they'll get the first one." He smiled just a little. "Figured you'd say that." Outside the window, the Pacific shimmered under the rising sun, calm and merciless. I straightened the stack of folders on my desk and opened the latest report from Naval Oversight. The first line was clean and brutal. Subject: Hale Defense Logistics. Compliance Audit Active. Trigger source: Vice Admiral Carter. No ceremony. Just fact. By 0700, the command center was alive again. Rows of officers behind glowing screens, voices trading data, the low hum of systems at work. When I walked in, the room quieted instinctively. "Carry on," I said. They did, but with a different energy, the kind that follows when your commanding officer just made national news. Peterson's face appeared on the main screen moments later, the background behind him filled with white walls and the seal of the Department of the Navy. "Admiral Carter," he began, his voice clipped but steady. "You managed to turn a private event into a compliance milestone. Congratulations, I think." "With respect, sir," I said, the milestone was overdue. His mouth twitched, half irritation, half reluctant admiration. "Be that as it may, this thing is bigger than you now. The Secretary's office wants containment. No interviews, no leaks, no comment beyond official protocol." "Understood. And Rachel," his tone softened, "whatever comes next, stay precise. The Navy can't afford passion right now. It needs proof." "Yes, sir." The feed cut off. Evans exhaled. He didn't look too angry. "That's because he knows I didn't lie." He gave a short nod. "Then what's the next step?" "Paperwork," I said. "Lots of it. And 16. We spent the next 5 hours coordinating reports, cross-checking documentation, and responding to legal counsel. The phone rang nonstop. Some calls were supportive, some weren't. One came from my mother. I didn't answer. By noon, the news outlets had settled on their headline: Vice Admiral exposes defense corruption at charity gala, family ties under fire. Neat, sharp, just sensational enough to keep the public entertained. Evans scrolled through the article on his tablet and read aloud. "They're calling it the silent audit." I almost smiled. "Fitting." He looked at me. "You all right?" "Fine." "Doesn't sound like fine." "Fine enough," I said. "It's just strange, isn't it? You spend a lifetime fighting to keep things invisible, and the first time you speak, the world actually listens." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That afternoon, we received confirmation that Hale Defense's CEO, Richard Hale, had been taken in for questioning. The Carter Foundation's accounts were being traced. And Samantha, my sister, had gone silent. No calls, no emails, nothing. At 1,500, I left the base for Washington. The flight was short, the air thick with the quiet hum of engines and consequence. When we landed, I could see reporters clustered at the gate, microphones ready. Evans walked slightly ahead of me, his posture protective. A voice shouted, "Admiral Carter, is it true you exposed your own family's corruption?" I didn't break stride. I upheld my oath, I said. That's all. The cameras flashed, but no one followed. There was something about the uniform that still carried weight. Later that evening, in the sterile calm of a government briefing room, Peterson handed me a folder stamped Federal Ethics Committee. You'll be present tomorrow, he said. Formal testimony. Keep it factual. Always, I said. He hesitated. Rachel, you did the right thing, but right things have fallout. I looked him straight in the eye. So do wrong ones. He almost smiled. You really are your father's opposite. Thank God for that. After he left, I sat alone in the room for a while. The fluorescent lights hummed, the clock ticked, and somewhere down the hall, someone laughed a sound so normal it felt out of place. I pulled the pen from my pocket and began signing the preliminary statements one by one. Each line was an anchor, each word a record of accountability. When the last page was done, I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. This wasn't revenge. It was repair, the slow, methodical kind that doesn't look heroic, just necessary. Outside, Washington's skyline glowed in the distance, monuments lit against a dark sky. I walked out of the building and into the cool air, the smell of rain and stone heavy in the air. Evans was waiting by the car. All done? For today, I said. He opened the door. They're calling you the Iron Admiral now. I laughed quietly. That's what they call women who don't apologize. He grinned. Then maybe we need more of them. As the car pulled away, I looked out the window at the Capitol dome. The city gleamed like it was made of order. But underneath, I knew better nothing in Washington was ever clean. Still, the system had moved tonight. And that was enough. I leaned my head against the window and watched the reflection of the streetlights blur into lines silent, steady, and unbroken. The week after the audit felt like a slow-motion implosion. Not loud, not cinematic, just the steady collapse of a world that had been pretending to stand. By Monday morning, Hale Defense Logistics was officially suspended from all federal contracts. The Carter Foundation's accounts were under federal supervision, and Samantha's smiling face had been quietly removed from every charity webpage. Publicly, it was being called a temporary compliance review. Privately, it was survival mode. I was back at base by sunrise. The wind off the ocean smelled of salt and jet fuel, the scent of movement, of work. Out here, there was no gossip, no cameras, no whispers. Just systems running and people doing their jobs. Exactly the way I liked it. Inside the operations building, Evans was waiting with 2 files under his arm. Morning, Admiral. You're trending again. I don't check trends. He smirked. Good, because they're calling you the Ballroom Admiral. Someone online said you looked like you walked straight out of a courtroom and into history. Flattering, I said flatly, taking the file. He followed me into my office. Washington sent an update, he said. Preliminary audit findings confirm conflict of interest between Hale Defense and Carter Foundation. The committee recommends referral to the DOJ. Criminal? Potentially. I set the file down. The weight of the words didn't hit like pride, it hit like gravity. You don't celebrate when justice moves forward. You just make sure it doesn't stop halfway. Evans hesitated, then added, Your sister's been trying to reach you. Called 4 times this morning. I'm aware. She's saying it's all a misunderstanding, that she didn't know about the money trail. I looked at him, calm but sharp. Evans, do you believe in coincidences? He shook his head. Not in finance. Exactly. I turned back to the window. Outside, sailors marched in formation, their voices echoing across the docks. Each step sounded like clarity. By mid-afternoon, the call finally came through, not from Samantha, but from our mother. The moment I heard her voice, I knew it was bad. Rachel, she said, trembling, the press is camped outside the house. Your father hasn't been to work in 3 days. Samantha's distraught. She says she can't sleep, she can't eat. Please, stop this. I took a breath. Mom, I didn't start this. I reported a breach of ethics. The law is doing its job. This is family, she snapped. No, Mom, I said, my tone even. This is accountability. Family doesn't erase federal law. She was quiet for a moment. Then, softly, You've become so cold. I glanced at the uniform hanging by the door. No, I said. I've become consistent. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the map pinned to the wall. Every blue line, every coordinate order, structure, truth. That's what the Navy teaches. Systems that don't bend under emotion. That night, as I walked down the dock, I saw Evans sitting by the edge, the lights of the ships reflecting in the water. He handed me a paper cup of coffee when I joined him. "Rough day?" he asked. "Normal one," I said. He nodded toward the sea. "You ever regret it? Doing what's right?" He shrugged. "Doing it when it costs everything." I didn't answer right away. The waves lapped against the concrete, slow and steady. "When you join the service," I said, "they tell you that integrity is the backbone of command. What they don't tell you is how lonely it gets when you're the only one standing straight." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "You think your sister ever understood that?" "She understood control." "That's not the same thing." The next morning, headlines confirmed it. Federal Ethics Committee recommends criminal investigation. The photo underneath was of Samantha, walking out of her foundation's office, surrounded by reporters. Her hair was perfectly styled, but her expression, that old superiority, was gone. The caption read, "Carter family faces public reckoning." In a strange way, I felt nothing. No joy, no satisfaction. Just quiet confirmation that truth eventually lands, even if it takes the long way. Later that afternoon, Peterson called. "You're officially clear," he said. "The department reviewed your involvement. No reprimand, no disciplinary action. You did everything by the book." "Thank you, sir." He paused. "The secretary wants to use this case in ethics training. They're calling it the Carter Standard. How do you feel about that?" I almost laughed. "That it sounds like something my sister would have trademarked." He chuckled. "Well, consider it poetic justice." When the call ended, I sat back and let the silence stretch. The kind that isn't empty, just earned. That evening, I drove out to Point Loma, where the cliffs drop straight into the Pacific. The air smelled of salt and eucalyptus, the wind cold enough to sting. From up there, the ships looked small, even the destroyers. It reminded me how perspective works. From a distance, every storm looks manageable. I stayed there until the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky turned from gold to gray, then to the deep navy blue that feels like home. On the drive back, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call. It was a message from Samantha. "You didn't have to destroy us to prove a point." I stared at it for a moment, then typed back one line. "I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending it was whole." Then I put the phone away and turned the radio on the base frequency, calm and mechanical. The voice on the other end: "Read the evening weather report. Steady and impersonal. Visibility clear. Winds calm. All systems operational." I watched the road stretch ahead, lights flickering in the distance. Somewhere behind me, the empire of pretense was falling apart. But out here, everything was still working exactly as it should. The official notice came on a Tuesday. It wasn't loud, it wasn't televised, it was just an email marked confidential from the Department of Defense Policy Board. The subject line read, "Implementation of Revised Ethical Procurement Standards. Carter Protocol." I stared at it for a long minute before opening it. Inside was a memo no longer than 2 pages. It outlined new transparency measures for all defense-related charities, foundations, and contractors, an additional layer of reporting and disclosure to prevent any future Carter-style conflicts of interest. They'd turned my last name into regulation. Evans knocked on the office door. "Ma'am?" I looked up. "It's official. They put it in writing." He walked in, reading over my shoulder. "The Carter Protocol has a ring to it." "It sounds like a disciplinary code," I said. He grinned. "Or a warning." I wasn't sure how I felt about it. On one hand, it meant the system had listened. On the other, it meant my family name was now government shorthand for caution. Either way, it was permanent. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled. "Well, that's one way to leave a legacy." Evans hesitated. "You think your sister's seen it yet?" "She'll see it," I said. "She reads everything with her name on it, especially if it's not flattering." He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Later that morning, Admiral Peterson called. "You've made yourself famous, Carter." I was aiming for effective, sir. He chuckled. Sometimes they're the same thing. The Pentagon's drafting a briefing around your case. They want to showcase the new protocol at next quarter's ethics forum. I assume I'm not invited. You'd be surprised, he said. They want you to lead it. That gave me pause. You want me to stand in front of a room full of contractors and bureaucrats? And tell them how not to corrupt themselves? Exactly. I laughed quietly. You really do enjoy irony, sir. It keeps me young. The call ended, but the words stuck. For years, I'd been the one following rules others ignored. Now I was the one writing them. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure dressed in uniform. By noon, the internal bulletin had circulated through every naval base. Emails flooded in from officers. I barely remembered congratulations, commendations, polite respect. Some genuine, some obligatory. The kind that come when people realize your silence had purpose all along. I spent the afternoon reviewing logistics reports. Work steadied me. It always did. There's something clean about numbers. They don't lie, they don't flatter. Around 3, the phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a colleague. It was a number I knew by heart. Samantha. I let it ring twice before picking up. Carter. Don't use that tone, she said immediately. Her voice was thinner than usual, tired. You act like you're talking to a stranger. Depends on which version of you I'm speaking to, I said. A pause. Then, quietly, they took everything, Rachel. The foundation's frozen. Richard's facing charges. Mom won't speak to me. I'm sorry for that, I said. And I was, but not for the reason she thought. You humiliated me, she continued. Our entire family. You could have handled this privately. Privately? I asked. You were laundering defense money through a charity named after our father. There's no such thing as private once you start signing contracts with the Navy. You don't understand, she said, voice shaking now. I was trying to build something. You built it on other people's work, I interrupted. On trust you didn't earn. You called my career a little Navy job. Well, that little job just wrote the rulebook that dismantled yours. The silence that followed felt endless. Finally, she said, You really think this makes you better than us? No, I said simply. It just makes me honest. Then I hung up. Not in anger, but in finality, the kind that doesn't need an echo. That night, the base hosted a small gathering. Nothing formal, just officers and staff recognizing the policy update. Someone had printed the memo on cardstock and pinned it on the wall beside a tray of coffee. Evans raised a cup in my direction. To the Carter Protocol. A few others joined in. I nodded politely, smiled, but said nothing. There's no satisfaction in being right. Only relief that you didn't let wrong win. Afterward, I walked outside alone. The sky over the harbor was streaked with late light pink fading to steel blue. The USS Meridian was departing for a long deployment. I stood at the pier as the ship's horn bellowed through the wind. One of the sailors on deck noticed me and saluted. I returned it automatically, and for a moment, it felt like the world had realigned not perfectly, but enough. Evans joined me a few minutes later. You ever think about what's next? Always. And? Next doesn't matter, I said. Continuing does. He smiled at that. You sound like Peterson. I'll take that as a compliment. We watched the destroyer fade into the horizon until it was just a glint on the water. The sound of the waves filled the silence between us. Not awkward, just honest. Back in my quarters, I poured a cup of black coffee and sat at my desk. The memo with my name on it was still open on the screen. I read it again, slowly this time, line by line. Each word felt like both a scar and a promise. I closed the laptop and leaned back, the room dim, except for the glow of the harbor lights outside. The world would move on. News cycles would change. My sister would rebuild something eventually. But rules, real rules, they outlast noise. And somewhere, another officer would make a hard call someday and find the space to do it because of a line called the Carter Protocol. That was enough. The letter came folded inside a plain white envelope with no return address. It had been forwarded from my mother's house, postmarked 2 weeks earlier. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, sharp, the way Samantha used to write her college essays when she wanted to sound smarter than everyone in the room. I set it on my desk and stared at it for a full minute before touching it. The paper felt heavy, expensive, the kind of stationery meant to impress people, not communicate with them. When I unfolded it, 3 sentences stared back at me. Rachel, I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know that I finally understand what you were protecting. You didn't expose us, you saved us from becoming worse than the lie. No signature, just her initials SCH, Samantha Carter Hale. For a long moment, I didn't move. The words weren't sentimental, they were stripped bare. Honest in a way she'd never been when she had something to lose. Evans knocked softly on the open door. Ma'am? I didn't want to interrupt, but the Pentagon confirmed your speaking slot for the ethics forum next month. I folded the letter once more and slid it into the drawer. Understood. He caught a glimpse of the paper before I closed it. From her? I nodded. Good news? Depends on what you call good. He didn't press. One of the things I liked about Evans was that he never tried to fix silence. He just let it exist. When he left, I turned toward the window. Outside, the bay shimmered beneath a wide blue sky. Training drills echoed faintly across the base orders, responses, motion, everything in rhythm. That rhythm had kept me alive through wars, storms, and moral crossfires. But family doesn't move in formation. It lurches, resists, pretends it's fine while bleeding from the inside. I picked up the phone and called Admiral Peterson. He answered on the second ring. Carter. Sir. Just confirming my participation for the ethics forum. End of chapter. Already on the list, he said. They want you to close the conference with a keynote. I almost laughed. A keynote on what, sir? How to lose your family in exchange for integrity? On why it's worth it, he said. We don't teach that part enough. He paused, then added, I saw the news this morning. Your sister stepped down officially. Statement said she's taking time to reflect and rebuild. Thought you'd want to know. I did. I bear. And Rachel, he said quietly, for what it's worth, I'm proud of how you handled all of it. You never once let it become personal. Sir, it was always personal. I just refused to make it emotional. He chuckled. Spoken like a true officer. After the call, I opened the drawer again. The letter sat there, patient. I unfolded it once more and read the last line again. You didn't expose us, you saved us. Saved. That word didn't sit comfortably. People like Samantha always looked for redemption once the cameras left. But maybe she meant it differently. Maybe for once, she wasn't asking for grace, just acknowledgement. That evening, the base hosted a small recognition dinner for the audit division. Nothing fancy folding tables, paper name tags, lukewarm coffee. The kind of event that would have made my sister's eyes roll. Evans sat across from me, flipping through a printout of the newly approved Carter Protocol Manual. They really did it, he said. Every single base now requires dual verification for all contractor-related donations. It's not perfect, I said, but it's better. He nodded. You know, you've changed the way people talk about ethics around here. I didn't change it, I said. I just stopped letting them whisper it. Halfway through dessert, if you could call a government-issued brownie dessert, Peterson appeared at my side. Carter, he said. They want you to say a few words. Aller. I frowned. This wasn't supposed to be a speech. Neither was the gala, he said dryly. That got a laugh out of me. I stood and walked to the front of the room. No podium, no microphone, just a group of tired officers who had done their jobs well. Integrity doesn't get you applause, I said. It gets you distance. It costs comfort, sometimes family. But it keeps the system clean, and that's the only way any of this works. A few heads nodded. Some clapped softly. Afterward, Peterson shook my hand. You've got a way of making silence sound powerful, he said. I've had practice, I replied. Later, when the room emptied, I stayed behind for a while. The lights buzzed overhead, the smell of coffee fading into the walls. Evans passed by on his way out. Going home, Admiral? In a minute. When I was alone, I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the letter again. I read it one last time before folding it carefully and sliding it into my service record binder, right between the commendation for the Trident operation and my first deployment photo. Not as forgiveness, not even as closure, just as a record. The next morning, as the sun came up over the harbor, the ships began to move. Their white wakes trailed across the water like clean lines drawn over old stains. I stood at the pier, coffee in hand, the wind sharp and clear. The letter was still in my bag, tucked away but present. Evans joined me, his voice low. You ever think about what you'd tell her if you saw her again? I watched a destroyer push against the current. I'd tell her the same thing I tell every cadet who asks how to lead, I said. You can't control what people think of your choices. You can only make sure those choices can stand inspection. It nodded, quietly. The horn of a departing vessel rolled across the bay, deep, steady, commanding. I took one last sip of coffee and said, almost to myself, that's what command looks like. Then I turned back toward the base, ready for whatever came next, even if it was just another ordinary day that started with the sound of something honest moving forward. The morning of the inspection began before dawn. The base was quiet except for the sound of the flag rising against the wind, a hollow, steady rhythm that echoed across the docks. The kind of sound you feel in your chest more than you hear in your ears. I buttoned my uniform jacket and checked the alignment of my ribbons in the mirror. Every medal had its place, each one earned through years of small decisions. No one ever applauded nights of paperwork. Orders followed to the letter, the long discipline of doing the right thing when no one's watching. Outside, the horizon was still gray, the Pacific restless under the first hint of daylight. I walked toward the pier, coffee in hand, and watched the destroyer USS Meridian return from deployment. The ship cut through the mist with the precision of habit, steady, purposeful, alive. Evans approached from behind, carrying a folder. Morning, Admiral. Morning. They're expecting you in the hangar at 0900. The secretary's sending a live message for the ethics briefing. I took the folder from him and skimmed the contents final review notes for the Carter Protocol rollout. The same protocol that started as a footnote in an audit report and had now become Navy policy. You ready for your speech? He asked. I don't write speeches, I said. I give orders. He smiled faintly. That's what they call them now? I almost smiled back. Apparently. By the time we reached the hangar, the air smelled faintly of jet fuel and sea salt. Rows of officers stood at attention. Cameras had been set up for the broadcast, though I ignored them. Peterson stood off to the side, arms crossed, wearing the kind of look that mixed pride with relief. He gave me a nod as I walked past. Let's make this one memorable, Carter. Sir, I don't do memorable. I do accurate. That's why it's memorable, he said, stepping aside. I took the podium. The screen behind me showed the Navy SEAL and the words, Ethics and Command. I didn't need to look at my notes. I'd been living this speech for years. Leadership isn't power, I began. It's restraint. It's knowing you could bend the rules and choosing not to. It's remembering that honor is not a headline, it's a habit. The hangar was silent, the kind of silence that feels earned. When I was a cadet, I continued, I learned that the Navy doesn't build character, it reveals it. The same uniform can look different on two people, depending on what they carry underneath it. And no title, no rank, no legacy gives you the right to twist integrity for comfort. Oh, I let that hang for a moment, then added, we've learned hard lessons this year, some public, some personal. The Carter Protocol isn't just regulation, it's a reminder that even the most decorated names can fall if they forget what they stand for. Peterson gave a small nod from the side. This institution, I said, was built on accountability, not convenience. And the day we start valuing image over truth is the day we sink without ever leaving the harbor. No applause. Just that steady, respectful stillness that's worth more than noise. When I stepped away from the podium, Peterson met me halfway. You just wrote the next training manual, he said quietly. I hope they read it. They will. It's mandatory now. After the briefing, I walked out to the pier again. The day had cleared, the sky sharp blue against the silver hulls of the ships. I could hear distant laughter from the sailors on deck, the kind of laughter that comes after long duty hours when the weight finally lifts a little. Evans joined me, squinting into the sunlight. You ever think about retiring, Admiral? Every time I wake up, I said. And then I remember I'm not done yet. He nodded. You think your sister saw the broadcast? Maybe. But that wasn't for her. He didn't ask who it was for. He just stood beside me, silent, the way good officers do when words would only get in the way. The sound of the waves hitting the docks carried a steady rhythm, syncing with the faint hum of the engines from ships preparing for departure. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small folded paper, Samantha's letter. It had been there since the day it arrived, edges worn now, corners softened from habit. I read the last line again, quietly. You didn't expose us. You saved us from becoming worse than the lie. Maybe she was right. Maybe in some strange way, this was her peace offering. Or maybe it was just the truth finally surrendering. I folded it back up and tucked it into my pocket. From across the water, the Meridian's horn sounded deep, measured, commanding. It rolled across the harbor, over the buildings, and into the open sea. Peterson walked up behind me, his cap tucked under one arm. You know, Carter, he said. They'll be quoting you for years. I turned toward him. That's not the goal. Then what is? I looked out at the water. Continuity. Making sure the truth outlasts the people who carry it. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile. You ever notice how quiet victory feels? I nodded. The loud ones usually aren't victories at all. I'll nod. As he walked away, the wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of ocean spray and oil, the smell of duty, of permanence. I stood there until the ships became silhouettes against the Sunday. My reflection shimmered on the surface of the water-white uniform, clean lines, no shadow of hesitation. People like my sister thought command was about control, but command was about clarity. It wasn't about who followed you. It was about whether you could still face yourself when no one did. The waves lapped against the dock, steady and unbothered. Somewhere deep in the distance, the ocean swallowed the sound of the last departing vessel. And I said it quietly, just to the water, the way truth is supposed to sound, not loud, just certain. They laughed at my little Navy job. Now they understand what command looks like. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching and sharing this moment with me. This channel tells stories about choices, justice, and quiet redemption, from cheating stories to revenge stories to the ones about husband betrayal that remind us how truth always finds its way. If that's the kind of story you believe in too, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and stay for the next one, because sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that hit the hardest.